Karl-Anthony Towns. I mean,
Amen.
We've been waiting for Karl-Anthony Towns to show up. Now, whether it's his last game when he said, I get up 1,500 shots every single day, and he got roasted on social media for saying that, it's a guy that started playing inside out, Greeny, and that's the biggest thing, UD. Like, a lot of players want to settle for jump shots, and that dictates how they play. But Karl-Anthony Towns, from the beginning, drove the ball and started bodying down low. That set a rhythm offensively, and then he found that stroke after he got out of foul trouble in the first half.
You can see the intent on the swing for him to drive the basketball, and when he had a smaller matchup with Derrick Jones Jr., taking advantage of it, going to the post, and that got it going from three-point.
Can we just say that shocking? You have because you had Derrick Jones Jr. multiple times throughout the course of the series, and you settled to float on the perimeter. That's not what he decided to do in this game.
Well, look, I mean, the criticism was loud. It started immediately in the postgame from Game 3. Shaq saying if the threes aren't going, get your big behind down in the lane. He didn't use that word. And you know what? It happened. Look, there's a great expression. I think it was Billie Jean King who first said it. Pressure is a privilege.
Yes.
When you're a great player like Karl-Anthony Towns is, that's what comes with it. When you don't play well, you're going to hear the criticism. What does it say to you that he bounced back like that on the road last night?
Well, I love Shaq, but Shaq said he can only shoot 2 and he got to get down there. Shaq, that's a little. You got to get him more than 2, big fella. You got to get more than 2. But I love the fact that he just trusted in the work that he does behind the scenes. He didn't get shy. He showed up because if you're shy, guys gonna start looking you off. So he didn't get shy. He showed up. He was aggressive. He scored from all 3 levels and he took advantage of every opportunity that he had. He was very efficient.
Windy, you were telling us earlier, again, a whole new audience joining us here off the top of a new hour. You spent some time with him. You spent some time with his father last night in the wake of all of the criticism he heard after Game 3.
Yeah, I wanted to see how their last 24 hours had been, especially being on the road here where anytime you show your face, you're going to get potentially, jabbed at. And, they said that his mood really didn't change, that, his attitude was that he would be okay. And, he said that before the game. He came out in shoot around and said, I'm confident. And I was like, oh, man, Karl, you've maybe done it again, opening yourself up. But he made a game plan adjustment. And really, this game was about game plan adjustments. Certainly, the Wolves did defensively with some of their assignments. And Karl did not shoot a 3 in the first 2.5 quarters of this game. Instead, he went inside. He kind of did what Shaq wanted, although he didn't post. He was driving. He made 13 drives to the basket in this game. He's never had that many in a playoff game in his career. That set up him up for those outside shots, and then he started making them going down the stretch of the game, and his confidence grew. And that scoring, those fourth quarter points are so important to the Wolves. That fourth quarter burst from Towns was the difference in the game.
Those two guys, both of them, Alan. I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards, and probably in the reverse order from that. I mean, this is a genuinely great dynamic duo that was this close in each of the first 3 games of this series and now maybe have a little momentum going home.
And you got to give credit to Anthony Edwards also, the trust factor with Karl-Anthony Towns. While everybody else was raining criticism on him, Anthony Edwards wasn't. And you see in those highlights who kept feeding him the ball. Anthony Edwards was finding him and trusting him to keep shooting the basketball. So that stuff's important. Winning is the best deodorant. When you are looking terrible and certainly where you're missing a lot of shots, make some shots. But he still had 6 fouls. He still had the turnovers where 3 of them were offensive fouls. Like, he still played a lot of out of control defensively. But Chris Finch also masterful coaching performance in this game in what could have been an elimination game by making sure one of his most important players stayed confident, but protecting him when he did get into foul trouble late in the game. So that was a collective. Karl-Anthony Towns kept his confidence in himself because he does have that. But the fact that the environment around him allowed it to happen was also part of why he was successful.
I just went back over some of it here again, and this is, again, we call a young team, 22 years old, Anthony Edwards. Cat is still a young player and has not a lot of playoff experience. They have won 6 of 8 road games in the playoffs so far, including 2 games facing elimination. I mean, they are growing up fast right now.
Sometimes being young is a luxury. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and that's a luxury, especially when you're in the playoffs and you're down 3-0. That's a luxury not to believe that you're supposed to go home. That's a luxury not to believe that you can't win the next game. And I'll tell you one thing, in the shoot-around the day of the game, Ant-Man walked by the media and said, Cat's going to hit 8 threes today. Now, he didn't hit 8, but for your best player to breathe that life of confidence into you on a closeout game, that goes a long way for a player.
But also 4 of 5 from 3.
They only took 24 threes in this game. They were averaging 37 three-point shot attempts coming into this game. So they took less threes. They played inside out. But also give Anthony Edwards a lot of credit, right? He got to his midi a lot. He got to that mid-range game a lot. You even see in that last play with Rudy Gobert, that bucket he hits down the stretch. Typically, Ant would have came off that and tried to shoot a three. He would have settled, but there was a re-screen.
Yes.
People at home don't recognize how critical that is. Give me one screen, or if I'm not close enough, re-screen me again. That allowed him to get his feet right inside the three-point line. That's the mid-game range we're talking about.
They were trying to save Ant Edwards' energy down the stretch of the game. Well, they threw that package out, and they went to the full Ant mode. They put him on Luka Doncic, what he had been guarding elsewhere, and Luka struggled against him. 36 different possessions. Ant was the primary defender on Luka. Luka just 5 of 15 shooting. That change enabled Jalen McDaniels, their much taller defender, to switch on to Kyrie Irving, 6'9", extremely long arms. He was effective on Kyrie. To collectively, Kyrie and Luka had their worst shooting game, their worst scoring game of the series. And then a big offensive move down the stretch of the game. They played Ant at point guard, put Mike Conley off the ball, using all the energy he had. He gets 9 assists in the second half. He's never had a half in his career where he's had 9 assists. And I'll tell you, he still had enough energy after the game to trash talk everybody and tell all the ushers and security guards he'd see him back for Game 6 on Saturday.
Yeah, he said the same thing to Micah Parsons. We'll play that for you a little later. Kyrie and Luka shot 13 of 39 from the floor last night against that defense.
Yeah, I mean, Jaden McDaniels gave Kyrie Irving a lot of issues with his size, his length, and his athleticism. And Anthony Edwards also playing on Luka. Look, can I just say something, though? It's crazy that Luka had an off game and had 28, 15, and 10.
Yep.
Yeah.
Double. Like, it's like, this is, and by the way, that is the micro margin that you need him to have an off night in order for you to win the game.
Well, that's why he's one of the 3 or 4 best players in the world.
Yes,
I mean, that's what we're talking about. One team has 2 superstars that had been great in clutch time through the first 3 games of the series. Every one of these games has been decided by nothing. I think the overall scoring margin right now is 8 points through 4 games. So while Minnesota was down 3 games to none, they were right there in each of those games. Teams ever come from 3 games to none down to win. We all understand that. But teams have come from 3 games to 1 down to win. And it does seem to me that, Windy, if you're going to be down 3 games to 1, the best way is A, to have won the last game, the most recent one, so you have a little momentum, and B, as you pointed out earlier, to be headed home for Game 5. They've got 2 out of 3 of the final games at home. I think Minnesota is absolutely alive in this series, win-man.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a formula that would ever exist for coming back from 3-0, but if there was one you could see it happening, it would be this one. Because obviously, if you have, if you're the home team, you have a chance to keep the momentum going. You're sort of the quote unquote favorite because you have home court advantage. That means that games 5 and potentially game 7 are at home, so it enables you to keep your momentum going. And that's what happened. UD can speak to this. This was exactly the situation last year when the Heat got up 3-0. Then Boston survived in the series by winning Game 4, then went home for Game 5 and kept the momentum going, eventually forcing a Game 7. And one thing I'll say, the Wolves are already now, despite this very young team, 3-0 now in elimination games this postseason. They don't seem to shrink in this moment, and they have won 2 of them on the road. And so I think that they will have some confidence, and a big factor going forward will be the health of Derek Lively, who has been a very valuable player who missed last night's game.
Yeah, 2 of those wins, as we mentioned, on the road, one of them Game 7 at the defending champs.
Yes, they're literally alive. Yes, they're literally alive.
They're
but
more
they're
than
on the ventilator.
No, they're
okay?
live.
Like they're on a
They're
ventilator.
live. No, they're not.
Like call the priest in, deliver the flowers, prepare the casket.
No, the
it's
hand
eventually
has
going to
come
be
up
over.
from the dirt.
Everybody
It
come.
has come up from the dirt.
Say your goodbyes.
It's alive.
Thank you so much for your time here. Thank you for all these loved memories.
Wrong.
Bye.
Wrong.
I don't think so. I really don't.
All right.
On the old show on Mike and Mike, we used to play that Gene Wilder, Alive. It's alive. If the series had gone a different way, if the Mavs, because every game has been right there in the final
You know
minute.
why it's going a different way?
If the Mavs had won Game 3 instead of Game 4, and it was still 3-1, I think we would all look at it differently. We have this idea, well, no team has ever come back from 3-0 down. Eventually, it's going to happen. I'm not saying this is the time, but going into this series, we all thought Minnesota, or many people thought Minnesota was the better
All I'm
team
saying
to
is you
begin
have
with.
2 of the most masterful artists in the game of basketball.
Right.
On the same team that, by the way, I'm not giving Kyrie another off night. So I hear everybody what they're saying. It's easier said than done to stop those.
Are they live?
I disagree. They are alive and well and kicking.
And kicking?
And
Like they up running around the bed?
home. Going back home, they're young, they're athletic, they're confident. You see what they said. I never heard a player say, I can't believe that they can beat us, and he was down 3-0. Clearly they can beat you because they beat you 3 games. And he still does not believe it. They don't believe it.
Take me through how much carryover there is from one of these games to another. It's amazing to me how much the momentum seems to swing, how much the emotion seems to swing. One day a team is done, the next day they're live. How much does that carry over when you're actually in these playoff series instead of sitting here talking about them?
That's the playoffs. After one game, you could be hanging out with your family eating dinner, and the next night you want to sleep you want to be in a room in the dark. That's literally the playoffs. Like, it's either win or you're miserable, and that's how it goes. So Dallas can say that they're confident right now. They can say it's just one game, but you want to close out when you have a chance to close out. And you do not want to give a team life, especially this young team.
Wendy, you were there obviously last night, as you have been for every moment of this series. Did you see any concern, anything from the Mavericks? We played some sound bites earlier this morning, nothing earth-shattering from Kyrie and Luka. Did you see or hear anything that would give you a read into their confidence level?
No, I think, Luka did the classic thing, taking the blame. I really can't say enough about how important I think Derek Lively is. Now, he basically has whiplash. So I think there's a belief that he will continue to get better today and tomorrow, and he'll have a chance to play in tomorrow night's Game 5. But how effective can he be? Because he's extremely athletic, and he's been a huge difference maker. We're talking about 4 games that have been played, and there's 8 points separating the teams over these 4 games, and Lively is plus 22. He's the number 1 plus-minus player in the series for the Mavericks. He's 13 of 13 from the field because he's an outlet for when the Wolves put any pressure on Kyrie or Luka. And, what happened last night is they brought back Maxi Kleber to play those Lively minutes, who's been out since the first round with a shoulder injury. He's clearly not ready to play. He was hesitant in looking for his 3-point shot. So the fall off from Lively to Kleber, just in an injury sense, is huge. So that's an enormous X factor. What Lively's able to do will make a difference in whether the Wolves can pull some sort of comeback here.
Let me show you just how historically close this series has been. Cindy, if you can, the first 4 games of these finals, these Western Conference finals, have been decided by a combined total of 8 points. It's the first conference final in which each of the first 4 games was decided by single digits in 13 years. So that's the point I think the rest of us are trying to make, Jay, here, is that when each game could go either way, yes, the law of averages says one team isn't going to win 4 in a row of them. I understand that. But it also says that no team should have won 3 in a row of them. Every one of these is a bounce this way, a bounce that way. You're telling me you trust Luka and Kyrie to find a way one time in the next 3 in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, just because I feel like the Minnesota Timberwolves have always had a lead coming down the stretch. And I feel like what happens with Dallas is it becomes death by 1,000 cuts because those two are so surgical in their approach and how they're able to attack a lot of high pick and rolls. Yes, Derek Lively being out, but still, don't tell me any of you were watching that game last night being like, well, here it goes.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm on fire. It's NBA,